Welcome today to our CRV webinar, where we're going to be talking everything about Wagyu. If you've ever considered using Wagyu in your breeding program, today is the perfect opportunity to find out about the process, including the types of contracts available, the ins and outs of breeding Wagyu, and the delivery to market. CRV is exclusively selling semen straws from the New Zealand Wagyu Corporation's Black Origin Wagyu. The purchase of Wagyu semen from CRV includes an agreement for New Zealand Wagyu to buy the resulting Wagyu cross calf for a contracted price. At the end of this webinar, there's going to be a Q&A session. So if you have any questions throughout, please write them in the Q&A box, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. And we're going to be recording this webinar today, so you can rewatch it at any time. So to talk on the finer details of the agreement, we have three wonderful guests joining us today. We have New Zealand Wagyu Director Arato, who's going to give us an insight into the growing Wagyu market and the significance of this agreement with one of the largest meat companies in Japan. Also joining us is Scott, who is a Southland dairy farmer milking 350 Friesians, and he's here to share a bit of experience of breeding and grazing Wagyu. And from CRV, we have Peter. He's our product development manager, and he's going to be talking process for breeding Wagyu and the opportunity for farmers in this growing market. So before we start, we have a bit of a question for you. On your screen, we're going to have a poll appear, and I'd love you to select the main question that you want answered by the end of this webinar. So I'm just going to launch that poll now. And hopefully you can see it on your screen right now. So there's four questions there, or three questions, yeah, four questions. So it's what you're interested in knowing more about. I want to know more about the Wagyu calf, more about the pregnancy, maybe more about the market, or maybe you want to know more about the contract. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time here. So if you want to just click away, select the one that you want to know most about, and then hopefully throughout this session, we'll get that answered for you. If we don't, we'll certainly address it in the Q&A session and in the wrap up afterwards. So I can see a good chunk of questions starting to flow through now, which is great. Oh, it's pretty well spread. We've certainly got some people wanting to know about the pregnancy, the gestation length and things like that. But certainly lots of questions or lots of waiting on the other questions too. So we've still got some movement coming through there. And sometimes it can be a bit tricky to select which one you want, but you know, certainly I'd like to think that we'll cover most of the questions, but we want to make sure that the key ones are certainly addressed by our team that we've got here. So I will give a few more seconds and then I'm going to wrap up the poll. So I'm going to end the poll there, guys, and I'll share the results because it's always interesting to see what other people are looking at. Yeah, so it's pretty well spread, but definitely the pregnancy and the gestation is an important aspect for us to talk about, and obviously knowing a bit more about the market. So hopefully we'll address some of that there. So, right. Well, thank you very much for your feedback there. I'm now going to move over to Peter from CRV, and Peter's going to share with us really the details of the partnership, what it entails, and a little bit more about the background as to why we went into this partnership. So I'll hand over to you, Peter.
Peter might be muted.
Yes. So this is what happens in these kind of meetings. When you mute, you need to unmute. So thank you, Rosanna, and welcome everyone. Pleased to be here this afternoon. So yeah, the partnership between NZ Wagyu and CRV. Why and what and how. The why is we've had as CRV been looking at the dairy beef market with more and more interest in the last 3 years. In that period, we've seen continued growth of dairy beef usage within our customer base, but also in New Zealand. And that growth in dairy beef usage through AI is no surprise, because it's farmers are looking at breeding from their best cows and not breeding from the cows that they don't want replacements from. they're also looking at having less bobbies, and that's where the consumer demands, but also processor demands come in, and they drive that behavior. And then in combination with sex semen, you can really come up with a breeding plan that gives you female progeny from your best animals, and then you put beef to the animals that you don't want to breed from. Now, the value proposition for the beef has to be there, and we very quickly and early on realized that we needed to look for a supply chain partner in that context, someone that could underwrite value of the dairy beef calf. And I'll look back at the discussions we've had with dairy farmers in the last couple of years, and yeah, they were frustrated by the uncertainty around the dairy beef calf values, especially in springtime. And so when NZ Wagyu approached us and we started talking to them, we very quickly realized that yeah, the partner that we were looking for was there, and the opportunity to create that value add for our customers, but at the same time also create the supply chain for Arato and Scott for NZ Wagyu was a really important factor for us to sign this agreement. And I think one of the principles that we really liked in talking to Scott and Arato was the fact that they have a different value proposition when it comes to the Wagyu, and we will talk about that further on. But it's that focus on that quality products, and that from our perspective will drive that future-proof part of the agreement, and the growth. The potential is there for growth and more opportunity for dairy farmers in New Zealand, but also for CRV and for NZ Wagyu. So that's the part, and I think the benefits for dairy farmers, when you look at it, they are in a position where they can get a premium price for dairy beef animal. They have security when it comes to the value of that dairy beef calf when they put the semen in the animal. That's very important, and it also helps them, helps farmers go towards a future that relieves some of the consumer pressures and demands, and that's another one. So I think that's a good summary, Rosanna, of the why and the what and the how, and we'll talk about the contracts a little later.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I think the key things there are it's that diversification and future proofing, and the pressures from not just our consumers but also even in the industry. You know, you talk bobby calves, so yeah, an incredibly important agreement, I believe. So I suppose to talk a little bit more actually about what is Black Origin, we have New Zealand Wagyu Director Arato with us. Now, his second language is English, obviously, so Peter and I will be helping out during his presentation. We have some slides to share with you, and we'll be having a bit of a chat, and Peter's actually going to go into a bit more detail around the contracts that we have available here with CRV. So I'm just going to share these slides for you, but really, Arato, if you want to start, you want to tell us a bit more about your role and where Black Origin actually how it started.
Okay, so I'm obviously from Japan and from Kobe. That's the Wagyu Central City, and I started my beef business. And I have a processing plant, butchery, restaurants in Japan. And so then I decided to come to New Zealand to mass produce Wagyu and do everything correctly. Unlike other Wagyu sort of thing. Yes.
What's the Black Origin Wagyu that started in 2015, I believe, and been selling in Japan since 2018, yes?
Yes. Yes, so Black Origin Wagyu, we started, and initially we called it Waitaha Wagyu, and we changed the name. And so we sent three bodies of finished animal to Japan. And then we received this order from the largest company, one of the largest company, meat company in Japan. So which was 10,000 head per year. So as shown in the photo, the meat quality sort of reached good enough to be sold in Japan.
It's quite specific how it gets sold in Japan. And I understand it has a different name in Japan. It's not Wagyu, it's Washu.
Yes, yes. So anything Wagyu means Japanese cattle. So Japanese cattle don't come from New Zealand or any other country. So also Wagyu means, name of Wagyu means very significant, culturally significant to Japanese people, especially for the people in the meat industry. So everybody sort of weren't happy about having Wagyu outside of Japan, but as Japanese people, they don't speak up. You know, they try to be friends rather than speaking up for themselves. Yeah.
So you are the voice.
Yeah, I'm the noisy one.
Excellent. And so what's really the main point of difference with the black origin Wagyu versus other Wagyu that might be in New Zealand?
So the chairman of this company and the association is also a chairman of Japanese Beef Association. And we are the first company outside of Japan to do proper true Wagyu beef. So that's probably the point of difference.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I suppose there's two different markets that we talk about. So the product is obviously, targeting overseas, but it does sell in New Zealand as well. Yes, you can buy it on your website, of course, directly as a consumer, but you have other markets in New Zealand that you channels to market? Yes,
so we supply top restaurants such as Sky City and some top restaurants in Queenstown, Auckland, some restaurants in Wellington, Christchurch.
And obviously overseas, there's a significant market there. I see there's like 40,000 straws that we're trying to sell in the short term. So there's quite a demand there, yes?
Yes, so we have a locked in order of 45,000 going to Japan and 40,000 going to China.
Only getting bigger in the future.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that, Arato. I'm going to move over to Peter just to talk a little bit more about the contracts that we actually have available. So every straw of semen that you buy through CRV will have a contract associated with it. And so there are different stages of that contract as it moves through the growth stages. So Peter, if you want to give us a bit of a rundown on what's available.
Yep, thanks, Rosanna. Yeah, so the principle of the agreement is that that as CRV we market the NZ Wagyu genetics and make them available to New Zealand dairy farmers. And when farmers purchase that semen, they also agree to a contract, and that contract, there's different contracts, and we'll run through the different options that are there. But through that contract or a contractual arrangement with NZ Wagyu, the farmers will then be able to sell the animals back to NZ Wagyu, and that's the supply agreement that farmers enter into with NZ Wagyu. So CRV supplies the genetics, and the genetics come from are bought and developed by NZ Wagyu, the black origin Wagyu. So that's well, we take care of that bit. And then through the contractual arrangement with NZ Wagyu, the farmers supply the calves. Now the first of contract is the calf supply, and that's within that calf supply contract. It states what NZ Wagyu expects from the farmers, and what the farmers will get back in return. And the focus from NZ Wagyu is Friesian type use of Wagyu on Friesian type animals, so F12 and plus. And the main reason for the Friesian type animal is centered around quality of the meats, and especially if we have too much Jersey in the mix, you get the yellow fat, and that's from a consumer perspective in Japan and in China, that's not desirable. And because NZ Wagyu is going for that top end of the market, that you have those demands, and that's so that's why the focus is on a Friesian type cow. So F12 plus animals need to look more like black and white, and certainly not brown or Jersey like. Then they use the Wagyu straws. They indicate in March, April how many pregnancies they have, and then in the spring, NZ Wagyu will organize for rearers to pick up the calves between 5 and 15 days old, and the set payment is for $180 for a bull and a heifer, and that's a guaranteed price. That's locked in. So that's the calf supply agreement. Farmers that rear dairy beef animals, they can also opt to include the rearer option, or you have specific rearers that will take the animals when they're between 5 and 15 days old. For the rearers, the animal health aspects are being paid for, so disbudding, castration, and vaccination. The weaning age is 100 kilos, and the payment is $350 for a steer or a heifer, and that is on top of the $180 if you also get the calves on the ground, if you have a calf contract. So that's how it works, and there are incentives for if you get to that 100 kg quicker. So that's in there. Growers, they take the animals through from 100 kg to 400 kg. Again, it's with live weight gain targets. Animal health is paid for, and you're basically looking at $2.50 per kilogram of live weight gain. So that's the grower contract, and then the animals, and I think that's an important one. The animals are then, after that, they actually go to NZ Wagyu's facilities to be finished, and that's the backgrounding. Arato, do you want to make any comments around the backgrounding and how you do that and why you do that?
Backgrounding in the finishing.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So they're going to intensive grain diet. So we'll transition them over the appropriate time, and so they go smoothly into the heavy grain. Then they'll be in the feed barn for 200 days, and some of them stay to 420 days. Yes.
And what's the reason to finish them off on in that on a grain fed and in a feedlot type environment?
Because they just to give marbling, and they make sure that the flavor is good, and the scent, the sweetness, and the tasteness. It's measured in many aspects, and also we make sure the fat become unsaturated fat, so that's very high in omega-3 and 9. So by the time they get finished, around 60% to 65% of all fat becomes unsaturated omega-3 and 9.
Really good for building the beach bodies, eh?
Yeah.
No, but that's where you guys differ from other Wagyu operations, and that's really the part where the additional quality comes in, and that's why you can sell to the premium market in Japan and
Yes.
China.
Yes. So when you eat good, healthy omega-3, 9 marbled good beef, your brain, your instinctive tells you that's a good thing you're eating, and that that triggers producing serotonin in your brain. So that helps you sleep well, that you become, your mental get very balanced.
Yep.
Which means less fights with your wife.
No, so that's the health aspect. So but it's certainly a different approach from what others offer in the marketplace, and I think it's important to address that. So yeah, so that's Rosanna. That's the contractual parts, the difference of what NZ Wagyu does.
Thanks, guys. I suppose the wrap up there is most of our farmers will be looking at probably that calf contract, but there will be probably a fair few amount of people looking at that rearer contract as well. Probably the main two ones for us. So thank you. And of course, it wouldn't be complete without actually talking to a farmer. So I'd love to introduce Scott, who's from way down Southland. He's a farmer that's got hands-on experience actually working with Wagyu and breeding with Wagyu into the program. So Scott, thank you for joining us. And before we start, perhaps you could share a bit about yourself personally and a bit about your farming environment.
Thanks. So we're down in Western Southland, a little bit of a sheep and beef, predominantly beef setup in a spot out west called Happy Valley near Tuatapere, and a dairy farm up at Eastern Bush that myself and my wife bought in 2015. And sort of always we've been searching for, I guess, a product that we're not all about the peace and love, but we certainly have been against the Bobby thing for a long time, just because morally I thought it was the right thing to do. We mucked around with the Charolais and the Herefords and all the other New Zealand sort of conventional stuff. And probably initially I had my favourites and compared to the Wagyu, but like the concept of being a part of something that starts and also we can have an impact on how it finishes with us. So it's something that's working really well for us, and we're really excited to be part of it.
So what sort of benefits have you seen from being part, including Wagyu in your breeding program?
Like ultimately just what I've touched on, not having to drive those little 5 to 10 day old calves onto the lorry and wave goodbye. And I think, from a financial point of view, there's nothing in it, and it was pretty disgruntling, I guess, with stock agents turning up every year and, picking the eyes out of the Herefords and getting rid of the balance. But look, ultimately, financially, it's working really, really well. It's on our little business, it's made a significant impact. So it's all been pretty positive in that department.
You touched on calving there, and certainly it's quite a common question for us is around or relating to calving. So how have you found calving the Wagyu crossbred animals?
So we've got a largely Holstein girls from overseas type genetics, and I dare I say it, initially we were CRV based and breed based, but we strayed away, and I can confirm we are back now, Peter. So, but how do they calve in comparison to the beef options that we've used in the past, like your Charolais and your Angus? And it's almost like putting a jersey over our grills. We've had zero problems. And I think, talking to, a few other cockies that have been involved longer than I have, that's probably about par for the course. So no problems in that department at all.
What about the colouring of the calves? I know a lot of guys, they use Herefords to, for that easy marker, that being able to identify them. How have you found the Wagyu, and how that's, how do you identify them?
Honestly, it's not as difficult as it looks. I think it's horses for courses a little bit, depending on the program that people run individually on their own farms. We're pretty open, big sort of Friesian Holstein type cows, and we use 3 weeks sex semen, and then bang, we switch over to the Wagyu. So with the slightly longer gestation, you'll have a wee bit of a gap in the in the sheds, but also there is a distinctive difference between the shape of the head. Obviously, the Wagyus are a little bit narrower in the poles than our New Zealand conventional type stuff, and longer in the legs and bigger in the ears. So, yeah, I think they're pretty distinctive. Yeah, I might be a little bit, if potentially we're using them over cows that we shouldn't be, like the F12 or less. You might get a bit more black to black and white stuff, but I think pretty quickly people will, after having a wee bit of experience with them, once they get through to 5 to 15 days old, they stick out like a sore toe.
You just mentioned gestation length. What in your experience has been the sort of average gestation length for those bulls that you're using, the New Zealand Wagyu ones?
About 5 days longer, conventional New Zealand stuff. So it's normally the first question I got asked when I was out and about, getting rid of a bit of semen. But look, I think we just have to be aware of it and build it into the system. It's not insurmountable, and when these contracts follow them, like Peter talked about before, yeah, people work it out for themselves. I don't think it's a big deal for me, but yeah, each to their own.
I think the key thing there is having a plan. You've got that, you've been strategic about using sex semen at the start, there's a gap coming, and then you've used Wagyu over the rest. So I think as long as you kind of know what's happening and got a good plan, it can work to your favor, right?
Didn't worry us in Southland this year because it snowed and pissed with the rain for about 3 or 4 days in between there. So it was nice to have a bit of a break in the traffic, I think. But yeah, you're not going to time that right every year.
No. So I suppose, is there any words of wisdom for other farmers that are thinking about jumping on the journey of Wagyu?
Words of wisdom, I don't know, but look, I think for our little business, like I touched on initially, it's with my mate here, it's something that we've put together around the contractual side of things, and it's been designed by New Zealand farmers that have had input on it, such as myself and a couple of other of our partners. So it's not something that's too hard to grasp. It's pretty simple, like a bit of a number 8 wild feel about it. So and also we would invite farmers to come along, for the journey. Like it's a process that we've put together for cockies like myself to be a part of a process that they can be involved in, from the semen tank right the way through to the plate in Japan or Sky City or wherever else, and get the opportunity to see it right through. So I think ultimately that was once a product that was cast out at 4 or 5 days old, and it's no joke that we're in the right place at the right time, because for all our Labour voters, I mean, like that, there's going to be fairly shortly it's an ugly topic, and I think we want to be out in front of it instead of behind it, the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, so to speak. So yeah, look, I think yeah, from that point of view, it's the right place at the right time, and yeah, we're excited to be a part of it.
Thank you again, Scott. As I said, it's always important to hear from the grassroots, and how these things can actually be, how they actually work in the field. So obviously there's been quite a bit of information covered today. I think the key points that I've picked up really on reflection is, New Zealand Wagyu semen straws, they're exclusive to CRV, they come with a contract, which is an incredibly, it's a lucrative way to diversify your farming business in a growing market, and especially in a market where we have got challenges of, the bobbies and how do we, sort of minimize risk on our farms. I think what I personally love about this premium product is that it's specifically grown for that Japanese market, premium being the important word here. New Zealand really needs to make the most of our opportunities to get more from less. That's really how we have to be thinking. So hopefully you now know more about the CRV and New Zealand Wagyu joint opportunity that we have available for New Zealand dairy farmers. At the start of the session, we asked you what you were most interested in knowing. The most important question was around pregnancy and gestation length. Scott talked about 5 days. Hopefully that's covered enough of what you need, obviously at a high level here, but at this stage, I thought I'd open for the questions from our audience. We have got a couple come through, and I'm just going to jump in and ask those. So we've got one from the field that talks about how do you identify calves on the ground against natural Jersey mating ones? So if you have accidentally got some in there from a Jersey mating, how do we identify? Are they easy to identify?
Me?
Yeah, let's start with you, Scott.
Yeah, so honestly, it's possibly something that may or may not should have happened. I'm picking, like, if it's a Jersey type animal. There is also the scenarios where we do have a few chaser bulls floating around for different clients, and you know, like the bulls are specifically not as choosy as us, so they'll not as picky. They'll go for whoever is accepting, and some of those times, at some of those cases, it will be an F12 or less. So look, in a perfect world, it's probably more of a time thing in the calf shed. It's probably not a day one, day two. I think you know, give it time. I think 5 to 15 days old, and as people build experience with the animal, you pretty quickly, you know, pick the fact that it's got a narrower head. I think traditionally the Wagyus have the more vertical poles, don't they? So rather than the horizontal, so that's a definite. But also the length of the ears and the fact that they're a bit leggier. So the more you see, I think the more confident you become with picking them.
And you talked about calving. We've actually got a calving question as well. Would you recommend the use across first calvers?
Yeah, so we do lots of it ourselves, like our whole herd, heifers, and we've got plenty of farmers that do, specifically because of their birth weight. You know, like they are competitive with the Jersey, so they'll we haven't had any problems in that department, and that's not to say that we won't. You know, like pretty quickly, I would say to farmers, you know, like in Southland, it can have the odd issue, and I've been guilty of it before in the past. You know, if your heifers are a bit sluggish and a bit lighter, or for whatever reason the grazier hasn't done a decent enough job, they get thrown on beat and get their ties pumped up into winter, and all of a sudden we grow a big fetus. And you know, so I think all that being said, like I do believe, aside any incidents, you know, very confident with their birth weight at the moment. It's right where it needs to be, and we've seen some in the shed this morning that were a good representation of that. So happy in that department. And
the semen itself, is it from New Zealand or Japan? This is actually a question we had on Facebook recently. And if it's from New Zealand, are the bulls pure? So are they a percentage of Wagyu? How does that look? It's probably a question for you, Arato.
It is illegal to get semen out of Japan. So all the semen straw are made out of bulls that we seeked and found, and they initially came from Australia. Yes, and the bulls.
They're pure?
Yep, early days. The semen straw is from 100% Wagyu, full blood. And in early days, we used purebred, which is above 97% or bulls to chase them. Then I have a market to go as a beef, not as Wagyu. Yeah. So like I have some restaurants in Japan, New Zealand, and opening quite a few in China. So yeah, those yeah, we have outlet. But nowadays, like all the bulls will be full blood, 100%. Yeah, so all the 100% Wagyu will be crossed. Yeah.
Our preferences for that, ultimately for that F12, F16 Holstein type animal with our full blood bulls, which are through a breeding embryo program, and we've you know, dealing with a couple of teams around the country, and obviously Peter's heading that up on one of the fronts there, and yeah, basically milking our full blood boys, our elite bulls, and that's what's going in the semen tanks, obviously. So that's our bucket list, is to get them into those F12 to F16, get the big carcass on the hook.
Thank you. And I think we've got one last question, and I think this is always a question that comes up Do the carbs drink, Scott?
Yeah, look, so it's genuinely with our competitors that have gone out in the market is pretty much after I say g'day, who I am and where I'm from, and they shake my hand, that's just about the next thing that falls out of their mouth, with the greatest respect. But look, honestly, for us at home, we've really stress tested it this year. We've got a great team of guys at home this year, and my wife's managed to sneak out of the calf sheds mostly this year, but we've on purpose had the, I think our herd initially this year, we might be somewhere around the 30 to 45% mark, Waggies to Holsteins dropping out on the ground, considering that we're not quite done. And on purpose, because I get asked this question from the top of the country to the bottom of the country, we've made sure as they hit the sheds, that's where they stayed. So we've got 15 in each pen. There might be 4 or 5 Waggies in each pen. We're over at one of my farms this morning, and they're as competitive as anything else. They sulk like anything else. So we're all Holstein and Wagyu in the pens, and they're just as good as the rest. I think it's a mindset thing. Yeah, so my experience has only been good, and we've put a lot of emphasis this year on, I guess, upskilling ourselves and our team on the colostrum quality, and doing the bricks test and things like that. I think you pretty quickly build a pretty bulletproof system if you're following that professional advice, and our experience has only been good in that department. So open to criticism on it, but yeah.
Time will tell, I'm sure, but thank you. I appreciate that, Scott, and good to see a bit of a trial in the shed going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so great questions, everyone. I really appreciate you submitting those. A summary will be sent to everyone who's registered today, and as I said, there will be a recording made available to everyone. So once this webinar ends, there's going to be a survey that will come up. You will have the opportunity to provide feedback and to ask any further questions that may come to mind. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to my panelists for joining me. Please reach out to CRV if you'd like to know more, or you want to purchase some New Zealand Wagyu semen. And if you want to actually purchase Black Origin Wagyu, please check out their website at www.blackorigin.co.nz. Thank you, everyone.